Okay, so when you think of the United States, you probably think of a global superpower, right? Well, let's forget all of that for a minute. We're rewinding the clock all the way back to the beginning. Back when the U.S. was less of a nation and more of a fragile, debt-ridden startup. They just pulled off this impossible revolution, and now they faced an even bigger challenge, just trying to survive.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You've just won a war against the biggest empire on Earth. The confetti settles, the victory parades are over, and then what? Building a country from scratch? Turns out that was the real battle. For the brand new United States, this simple question was the ultimate and, frankly, terrifying challenge.
And the first problem, the most immediate crisis, was money, or a total lack of it. The new nation was completely, utterly broke. It owed millions to countries like France, and maybe even worse, it owed money to its own soldiers, the very guys who had just won the war. Without some kind of financial stability, and fast, this whole American experiment was on the brink of just imploding.
So this desperate financial mess really sets the stage for the new nation's first great internal conflict. And stepping right into the middle of this chaos, with a bold and super controversial vision, was the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. Now, Hamilton's plan wasn't just about paying off some bills. No, it was way bigger than that. You can almost think of it as a masterclass in marketing. His goal was to convince the entire world and its own citizens that the United States was a safe bet, that it was a good investment. It was all about building credit and proving that this new federal government was here to stay.
And here's where the plan gets kind of brilliant. First, by having the federal government assume or take on all the individual state debts, Hamilton immediately tied the financial interests of the wealthiest people in the country to the survival of the national government. It's simple, right? If the nation fails, their money disappears. The new bonds, the taxes, the national bank, it wasn't just about money, it was about creating a powerful, centralized economic engine for the country.
But oh boy, was this plan unpopular, especially down south. States like Virginia had already paid off most of their debts, and they were furious. Their attitude was basically, why should we have to bail out the northern states? So to get the votes he needed, Hamilton cut a legendary deal with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. In what's basically one of the most famous backroom deals in American history, the South agreed to the plan, and in exchange, the nation's capital would be moved south to a brand new city on the Potomac River. Pure political horse trading.
This whole fight over money, though, it really pulled back the curtain on a much deeper divide. This was a fight for the very soul of America. And this clash of visions was perfectly embodied by two absolute giants of the era, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson.
This was truly a battle of two completely different futures. On one side, you have Hamilton. He imagined a bustling industrial America, a powerhouse of trade and manufacturing, all led by a strong central government and the educated elite. For him, the Constitution was a flexible guide. But on the other side, you've got Jefferson. He dreamed of a quiet, decentralized republic of small, independent farmers. He believed in states' rights and that the Constitution should be read literally, word for word.
And this conflict got really personal. This quote, it just perfectly captures Jefferson's complete contempt for Hamilton's world of finance and banking. To him, bankers and speculators didn't create anything real. They were just parasites moving money around. Real value, real wealth came from the soil. You see, this wasn't just a simple policy debate. It was a deep, moral disagreement.
Now, a duel of ideas this big doesn't stay behind closed doors for long. Oh no, it spilled out into the real world, sparking the nation's first major internal rebellion, and you guessed it, giving birth to its first political parties.
Hey, remember that excise tax from Hamilton's plan? Well, for farmers out on the Pennsylvania frontier, whiskey wasn't just a drink. It was basically a form of currency. So they saw this new tax as a direct attack on their livelihood, and they rebelled. They refused to pay. So what did President Washington do? He didn't just send a sternly worded letter. He put on his old uniform, got on his horse, and personally led an army of 13,000 men to crush the rebellion. The message was crystal clear. This new federal government is here to stay, and its laws are not optional.
Well, with a rivalry this intense, it was probably inevitable that these two sides would get organized. Hamilton's supporters became known as the Federalists. They wanted a strong central government, and Jefferson and Madison's crew, they became the Democratic Republicans, and they championed states' rights. And just like that, the two-party system was born, the very thing George Washington had warned would poison the new republic.
Speaking of which, In his farewell address, Washington basically offered a mic-drop moment with some incredibly prophetic warnings. He pleaded with Americans to put their national unity above their party loyalty. He told them to steer clear of getting tangled up in foreign wars. It's almost as if he could see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and he was trying to give everyone a heads up. And guess what? Those challenges arrived almost immediately. The nation's next great test didn't come from within. It came from its old enemy, Great Britain, in a conflict that's often called America's Second War for Independence.
A huge part of the problem was this British practice called impressment. See, Britain was locked in this desperate, massive war with Napoleon, and the Royal Navy was always short on sailors. So their solution? They just stop American merchant ships on the high seas, board them, and kidnap American sailors, forcing them to serve the British crown. For the young United States, this was an absolute outrage and a total violation of its sovereignty.
Meanwhile, back in Congress, this passionate new generation of politicians, nicknamed the War Hawks, was just banging the drum for war. They were furious. They demanded an end to impressment, an end to British meddling on the frontier, and they very confidently boasted that conquering Canada would be, and I'm quoting here, a simple matter of marching.
So about that simple matter of marching, yeah, it didn't quite work out that way. The invasion of Canada was a total disaster. In fact, the war went so badly that in August of 1814, British troops actually captured the nation's new capital city and set fire to the White House and the Capitol building. It was a humiliating, absolute low point for the young republic.
But here's the great irony. The War of 1812 was technically a military stalemate. Nobody really won. But for America, it was a massive psychological victory. Just surviving a second war with Great Britain sparked this incredible wave of patriotism and nationalism. It helped forge a new American identity. And it created a new tough-as-nails American hero, Andrew Jackson, the celebrated victor of the Battle of New Orleans.
So, after surviving 2 wars with Britain and these deep internal divisions, the United States kind of emerged from its chaotic teenage years with a new sense of confidence, a new swagger. It was finally ready to assert itself, not just as a nation, but as a real continental power.
$15 million. That number represents one of the single greatest real estate deals in all of human history. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson, yes, the same guy who championed a small, limited federal government, set aside all his strict constitutional principles to authorize the purchase of the entire Louisiana territory from France.
And just like that, with the stroke of a pen, the country doubled in size. I mean, overnight. This wasn't just about getting more land. It was about the country embracing a whole new, expansive destiny. It was now clear that the future of America lay to the west.
But all of that westward expansion forced an issue that the country could no longer ignore, the issue of slavery. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was, well, it was a clever but very fragile political bandage. It kept the delicate balance of power between free states and slave states in the Senate, but it didn't actually solve anything. It just kicked the can down the road, delaying a conflict that was looking more and more inevitable. And then finally, the nation made its boldest geopolitical statement yet. The Monroe Doctrine was basically the U.S. drawing a line in the sand and issuing a clear warning to the old powers of Europe. It said, "The Americas are no longer open for business. This hemisphere is our sphere of influence. Stay out." It was the ultimate declaration from a nation that had survived its crucible and was now ready to stand on its own 2 feet.
So, the Republic survived. It passed its first brutal tests. It grew and it found its voice on the world stage. But those very compromises that held it all together, especially that fragile bandage they placed over the deep wound of slavery, left a ticking time bomb right at the heart of the American experiment. The first test was passed, sure, but in doing so, it planted the seeds for a much, much greater one to come.